Good morning, class. How is everybody this morning?
Great.
Feeling good?
Feeling great.
A little chilly out there today?
It's very chilly.
A little chilly out there today. So let's get you warmed up a little bit and let's think about what we did yesterday. Can anybody tell me what we did yesterday? Who remembers?
We talked about the Linnaean classification system a little bit.
The Linnaean classification system. What is that? Can anybody add to that a little bit?
Taxonomy, the kingdom, phylum, class, order.
The kingdom, the phylum, the class, the order, something to add to that?
And this really cool dude, he wanted a way to kind of break species down into specific, classifications so that we would know kind of what they were related to or what characteristics they might have similar to each other. And so he created this awesome system so that we as scientists could break them down and figure out what are their similarities and what are those characteristics.
Ah, okay, that's pretty good. So then that might bring to mind a statement that we talked about yesterday. Mm-hmm. Who remembers this statement? You guys all remember? So you might want to check in your notebooks from yesterday and pull out our diagrams that we were working on. And we use this statement here, and what's that for? What does that mean? King Philip cried, "Oh, for goodness sake." What does that have to do with plants?
This is the system.
The system. This is the system?
Yeah, the classification system.
The classification system. Amanda, do you agree with that? Is that what that means? That is a classification system?
No.
No?
Yeah. It's a way to help us remember the classification system.
Oh, okay. So this is a way to help you remember the classification system. So if we were going to actually look at the classification system, how does this help you?
Because each of the letters that they start with stands for part of the classification system, and it's in order, so it's still a reminder.
Okay, so this is, okay, now I understand. All right, good. So does it look something like this?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, so the kingdom, the phylum, the class, the order, the family, genus, and the species, right? So what we have been focusing on then really right now are the genus and the species. Especially we've been talking about our plant identification, and I brought in a few plants from the greenhouse that we have from our plant list this week. Does anybody remember what this one is?
Spider plant.
Spider plant. Now, is that the genus or the species? Neither.
That's a common name.
Now I'm really confused. What does that mean?
That's just what a lot of people would refer to it on a general basis. If they saw it in their backyard, most people call it a spider plant.
Okay. So it has another name besides that?
It does.
Well, this is starting to get a little confusing.
But I don't know it.
Does anybody know what the other name for this plant would be? If we were going to use genus and species to name this plant? Mm-hmm. Anybody remember?
You're going to have to help us out with that one.
So the genus starts with a C. Chloro. All right, we'll chlorophytum. Cosmosum. Yep. So go back and check in your notes on that from our plant ID for this week.
Cosmosum?
Cosmosum, yep.
Okay.
And then we also have a basil plant today that I brought in. And we have several varieties of these out in the greenhouse. Now we haven't yet talked about varieties, so I'm going to hold off on really getting into this one, but I just want you to remember that this is a basil plant and that there are different varieties of that. And I want you to kind of think about what a variety might mean. Okay? All right, any questions from you guys so far? Okay, so our essential question today is, what is the binomial system of nomenclature? You guys did a great job reviewing and going back to the overall Linnaean classification system for organizations. So if we take a peek here and we look at what we're going to do today, why do you think we even need to know this stuff? What's the purpose of learning this?
Because it's a universal system.
Okay, so if you're working with plants, it's good to understand and be able to name things properly. Amanda, something to add?
So when I go to the florist in town to get my prom corsage, I can ask for the right plant on my...
Very good. Yep. Clay, did you have something else to add?
Yeah, I have a friend that has a greenhouse, and so when you're talking with somebody, you're trying to buy certain plants for the greenhouse, you want to make sure that you're getting what you are asking for. So making sure that you know the proper name through binomial nomenclature is just going to help you be able to do that.
Absolutely. Very good. Okay, so another reason besides what you've learned is that it's a very important part to this class, right? We've got our plant ID list that we've been working from, and another reason would be you need to know how to properly name them, as you've already mentioned. And if you can't identify plants and you're interested in going into this for a career, it could be very difficult to get involved. And then of course a bonus activity for this one, right, is if you want to participate in any of the CDEs for FFA, you need to be quite aware of how to name and identify plants. So a couple of our objectives, we'll move through real close of what we're going to basically be focusing on. We sort of started to look at how to differentiate between the scientific and the common plant names. And then we've also looked at how to learn to explain these binomial system that we were talking about. What does all this mean? What does binomial mean? And how do we go about using these different words and terms so that it doesn't get so confusing? Some of our terms to know that we've already looked at, and you guys should have in your notebooks if you want to go ahead and pull out your notes from yesterday, that these should all be listed there from yesterday as well. And then again, if we're saying what is the binomial system of nomenclature, let's break this down a little bit more. What is nomenclature?
Is that a question for us to?
That is a question for you.
For us to answer. I think it's just giving it a name or giving it a classification.
Giving it a name or classification. Any other thoughts?
Pretty much what Clay said, like more scientific though.
Okay. Any other? If you had to define nomenclature. So you guys got it pretty good there. Yeah, we're just basically looking at a system of naming plants, right? So it's you classify a group, and then within that classification system, we're going to give it a name. An example here would be another one from our plant ID list. And this is St. Paulia ionantha. Does anybody remember what that plant is? What's the common name? Usually green leaves, fuzzy green leaves, and the flowers are either purple or pink.
I don't know it.
Anybody remember?
I'm failing on my plant ID right now.
I can't remember the common name.
Is it on the board?
No.
They're short, little, small things. And
Short, little, small things. Remember when we were talking about plants and the leaves and the different types of leaves that were there?
African violet.
African violet. Very good. Yes. Good job. Good job. Very good. Okay. So we got that one. So if we think about the binomial system, well, let's talk a little bit about some history. So early scholars used to write in basically Latin or Greek. So plants were described with scientific Latin or what were considered Latinized Greek names. And the binomial system of nomenclature was developed by, I think Clay had mentioned this earlier. Who was that?
is it George Linnaeus? Was that his first name?
No?
What is his first name?
Does anybody remember?
It's on like the tip of my tongue.
On the tip of your tongue.
What does it start? What letter does it start with?
How about if we do this? Who wants some extra credit for tomorrow?
Oh, I love extra credit.
All right, so whoever can bring me in the first name for Dr. Linnaeus tomorrow.
Is it Carolinius? No.
Keep thinking, all right?
I'm lost.
Okay, so let's move on. What does binomial mean?
2 names.
2 names, good, very good. So binomial basically means 2 names. So we have 2 names. We have a first name and a last name, just like we all have first names and last names, okay? So is the genus the first name or the last or the second name of a plant?
It's
First.
Okay, first. Any other thoughts? Is it the first?
It's a last one, isn't it?
Okay, so we
I think they're
have
flip-flopped, aren't they?
flip-flop. Would using your classification system that you have in your notebooks, would that help at all? Give you any indication as to whether it's first or last, you think? Amanda?
I think I'm gonna go with first
You're going to go with first? Why are you going to go with first?
because species comes after genus.
Because species comes after genus? What do you think? Does that change your thinking after you've looked at your chart?
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe.
I think
Claire,
you guys are right.
I feel pretty certain.
you feel pretty certain?
Genus, species.
Okay. Yeah, that's correct. The first name is always the genus, or considered to be the generic name of the plant. And it basically refers to a plant's group name. So there could be several St. Paulias, okay? For example, from the African violet. So all plants are going to have this same generic name. They're going to belong to a genus. And usually they have some sort of similar characteristics. So if they're in the same genus, it helps to start to be able to identify plants as well, because that means that there's going to be some similar characteristics that you can see within the plant. So I mentioned that basil is going to have different varieties, but they're all going to have the same genus that's going to go along with that particular naming of the plant. So the generic name usually is a noun, so this kind of will help you as well. And it can be a name of an early botanist. Can you think of any examples of some of the plants that we've learned that might be a name of an early botanist or represents a noun in some of the plants that we've had? I know I'm really making you think this morning. We just started looking at some of these. Any thoughts?
No.
No? All right. Okay, well, one example is Buddleia, which is butterfly bush, which is a pretty familiar plant that is grown, typically seen in a lot of butterfly gardens. And it was actually named in memory of Adam Buddleia. So the person that actually coined this and cultivated this particular variety of this plant, his name was Buddleia. I'm assuming, I don't know the exact history on this, but I think he named it after his son. Okay, a couple other examples. Acer is maple. Chrysanthemum are mums. Dianthus, our common name would be pink. Sedum is stonecrop. Pelargonium is geranium. Hibiscus is mallow. And in some cases, that generic name also can become the common name as well. For example, here we had chrysanthemum that just gets shortened down to mum lots of times. Okay. Any other questions before we move into species?
With chrysanthemum, though, so there's an actual flower named a chrysanthemum. Is that the same flower as what we would call a mum?
Yes. So what basically has happened over time is the chrysanthemum, the croissant, has been basically taken off of that beginning part there, and mum has become the common name for that. Yep. So the second name of the plant then is the specific name, or what we call the species. And again, if you refer back to your classification of organisms, you can see where that is the last piece to our triangle at the bottom there. So the Latin word species means kind, and it also, if you have plants that are in the same species, again, we're going to have similar characteristics that you're going to consistently see in those plant types. So understanding and knowing the names of the plants also helps you to be able to identify them as well. Okay. The species name usually is an adjective. So what is an adjective? Describes. When adjective describes a noun. So what are we starting to learn about these plant names?
It's going to describe to you what plant it would be and what it would look like.
Excellent. So if you kind of start to understand how this system works, it's starting to make a little bit more sense now. Seemed to be pretty confusing when we first started out though, right? Didn't make a whole lot of sense. What does all this mean? We had this King Philip. Who's King Philip, right? So making a little bit more sense now. Good. Okay, the name often gives some important information about the plant, and it also, for example here, Betula lutea is a birch tree. Lutea means yellow. Okay. All right, so what I need you to do now is just in your notes from yesterday, jot down a few more thoughts about, we went from confusing to things are starting to be a little bit more clear from an understanding right now. So I want you to take a minute and write down in your journals what is beginning to become more clear to you in your minds about this whole process of naming plants and why it's important to be able to name and understand this system that we've been talking about, the binomial system of nomenclature. So take a few minutes to do that. And then tomorrow we're going to continue to look in more depth at how the species relates to the genus, and we're going to start to look at a few more plants that we have out in the greenhouses and bring those in and start to study their common names along with their genus and their species. And then I have one exit ticket for you today, and what I'd like you to do is take this, and for homework tonight, along with that posed extra credit that I gave you, fill these out and bring these back in with you tomorrow. Okay? Any questions?